The Great Zimbabwe ruins have long captured imaginations and evoked intrigue about the people and culture that created this magnificent stone city. Located in modern-day Zimbabwe, these ruins consist of enormous stone walls built without mortar, enclosing over 300 acres of land. First inhabited in the 11th century and abandoned in the 15th century, Great Zimbabwe was home to over 18,000 Shona people, who constructed the walls as fortification and political power symbols. Over its long history and abandonment, Great Zimbabwe gave rise to many myths and legends which have added to its aura of mystery. Europeans who first encountered the site in the 19th century refused to believe it could be of African origin, instead attributing the perfectly fitted stone construction to foreigners or even biblical figures. African folklore told of ancestral spirits, magic, and sorcery associated with the stone ruins. Archaeologists have worked to uncover the truth behind these stories, parsing reality from fiction about Great Zimbabwe's spectacular history. European myths about Great Zimbabwe's origins. When European explorers first came across the enormous stone ruins of Great Zimbabwe in the late 19th century, they were incredulous that it could have been built by native African people. Racist attitudes of the day preclude Europeans from believing that the architectural sophistication evident in the perfectly stacked stone walls without mortar could be the work of local Shona tribes. Instead, Europeans concocted various stories about Great Zimbabwe's origins, speculating that it was built by foreign settlers from Arabia or even Asia. Portuguese traders who first saw the ruins in the 1500s believed it to be the ancient Ophir, mentioned in the Bible as the source of King Solomon's gold. In 1902, British archaeologist David Randall Meekever declared, with racist sentiment, that the ruins represented a via media between medieval Persia and Zanzibar. These foreign origin myths were definitively debunked in 1929 when archaeologist Gertrude Cadden Thompson undertook extensive excavations, examining artifacts, architectural style, local traditions, and radiocarbon dating results. She published her conclusions that Great Zimbabwe was undoubtedly constructed over generations by local Banda-speaking people, using building techniques perfectly adapted for the geography and geology of the region. Despite the conclusive evidence for Great Zimbabwe's African origins, the Rhodesian white settler government continued promoting myths about Phoenician, Arab, or Asian creators of the stone ruins well into the 20th century. This helped justify racist denial policies excluding native blacks from positions of power over this area deemed culturally important to foreign white groups. Finally, in 1980, when Zimbabwe gained independence, government educational programs and archaeological research definitively established Great Zimbabwe as a powerful city inhabited, constructed, and run by ancestors of the modern Shona people. The evidence debunked the last vestiges of colonial racist myths about the site. Mawari, Great Zimbabwe's guardian spirit. While foreign myths discounted native African construction of Great Zimbabwe, within Shona folklore developed cultural legend about the site and its origins. A prominent role is played by Mawari, revered by Shona religion as the supreme god and giver of rain and fertility of the land. Great Zimbabwe and many similar stone ruins nearby were known as houses of stone Demo Imbahuru, directly linked to Mawari as houses built for the guardian spirit. Within the walls of Great Zimbabwe was a cave shrine dedicated to Mawari, the focal point of the sacred site. Shona stories tell of how Mawari commanded the ancestors to build Great Zimbabwe and imbued its walls with magic, protecting power against enemies. The shamans Svikiros could communicate with Mawari at the shrines to make rain and divine the future. Even well into the 20th century, local Shona tribes observed strict taboos against trespassing on sacred land at the Great Zimbabwe site or removing any of its relics, which would anger Mawari. Folk stories tell of those who stole gold or mishandled artifacts from Demo Imbahuru suffering fatal snake bites, going insane or becoming seriously ill due to Mawari's wrath. Archaeologists working to uncover Great Zimbabwe's history took local beliefs in Mawari's protective powers seriously. Gertrude Cadden Thompson undertook months-long ritual efforts, appealing to the god Mawari for permission before removing relics from the sacred cave shrine for study. In this way, science and local oral history came to an agreement about preserving and respecting the site's legacy. The Lemba tribe Black Jews. A variation on the foreign origin myth of Great Zimbabwe emerged in the early 20th century, surrounding the Lemba or Waremba tribe of southern Africa. Numbering about 70,000 semi-nomadic people, the Lemba displayed cultural practices highly distinct from neighboring Banda tribes, speaking a unique click language, wearing a Star of David around their necks, and avoiding pork and other trappings of Islamic influence common in the region. This led to suggestions that the Lemba were descended from Jewish settlers who may have built Great Zimbabwe. The theory aligned with their oral history recounting ancient Jewish ancestors arriving from far over the seas, becoming rulers over the land, and constructing the Great Stone City. Archaeologists noted the Lemba account of their patriarchs named Siddiqui, whose 7 sons became progenitors of Lemba clans, reflected the Banda foundation epic of Great Zimbabwe being settled by chiefs with similar names. The Lemba's possible Jewish connection remained speculative for decades until modern DNA analysis discovered in the late 1990s that over 50% of Lemba men carried a particular Y chromosome only present among Jewish Kahanim priestly families. This definitive link between Lemban and Semitic ancestries seemed to confirm their oral tradition of ancient Israelite heritage. However, their DNA also stems from intermarriage and assimilation with local Banda tribes. Despite the evidence suggesting Jewish ancestors, the Lemba's culture and construction of Great Zimbabwe itself developed on-site in Africa without outside builders. The Jewish connection enriched the cultural melting pot that produced the famous stone ruins, sorcerers and warriors. Beyond the supreme god Mawari, Shona folktales further portray Great Zimbabwe as a city infused with intense magic power and mystic rituals. This served political purposes, with 16th century ruler Nyatsimba unifying local tribes through rituals at the site, and likely promoting belief in his supernatural abilities to encourage obedience. Tribal shamans who communicated with Mawari also performed rainmaking ceremonies essential for agriculture in the arid climate, adding to spiritual awe of Great Zimbabwe's royal leadership. Folk stories passed down generations tell of how Nyatsimba commanded demons to construct massive stone walls surrounding Great Zimbabwe through magical nightly feats. When workers returned each morning, new fortifications miraculously stood completed without need for structural scaffolding. Some archaeologists believe rituals occurred at the wall's narrow entrance passage, invoking spirits to protect against enemies. Local legend claims Great Zimbabwe's granite mortarless construction inspired later rulers to build similar structures like Kami and Danengam, through magic spells binding the heavy stonework together without support. In contrast to European myths of external engineering geniuses giving rise to Great Zimbabwe, folk legends emphasize supernatural magic literally conjuring the city into existence through concentration of mystical powers. The incredible achievement of creating this massive stone settlement served as physical proof, animating forces coursing through the rulers, shamans, and people of this land. Their spirits inhabited the walls as active legacy for future inhabitants. Lost treasures, hidden gold mines. European colonists in the 19th century may have rejected native African construction of Great Zimbabwe, but they embraced stories of vast gold riches plundered from the ruins and fabled mines deep below the ancient city. As news of the discovery reached European ears, many adventurers, mercenaries and treasure hunters undertook dangerous expeditions into the African interior on gold-seeking missions to locate Great Zimbabwe's reputed lost mines or find other hidden caches in wilderness caves. Several Portuguese documents from the 16th century mention production of gold, copper, and iron goods traded along the Swahili coast, with cloth and ceramics imported by Arabs and Chinese. Great Zimbabwe undoubtedly facilitated mining precious metal resources from local mines through at least the 1400s, as evidenced by archaeological digs uncovering crucibles, furnaces, and tools for metalworking. However, evidence suggests the scale was modest, with resources largely exhaustion by the site's abandonment. In African folk tales, the abandoned mines gave rise to imaginations of ongoing raw riches, hidden within tunnels and secret caverns directly beneath the Great Zimbabwe structures. Local legends spoke of evil wizard guardians driving intruders insane to keep the gold protected. Or wanderers in tunnels would encounter endless maze passages, dropping down endless dark pits. escaping back to surface days later with no food or water to die in sun-drenched exhaustion. Stories tell of ancestors throwing metal weapons, tools, and ornaments into deep pits within Great Zimbabwe, before abandoning the site to prevent sacred objects being looted or angering Maori if removed. Flood tunnels were told to conceal additional lower levels underneath known ruins where greater treasures remain buried, reinforced by tales of two 19th-century gold seekers disappearing and never returning from excavation explorations. To this day, with advanced ground-penetrating surveys and satellite imagery of Great Zimbabwe and surrounds revealing no hidden shafts, locals continue seasonal gold panning expeditions at streams nearby. The sparkling precious metal wears smooth over ages, churned down from vein sources, through erosion hundreds of miles away before gathering along riverbeds. But inquiries about large-scale industrial mining operations in the vicinity are still met with knowing smiles. That the biggest golden lodes remain undiscovered, deep beneath, protecting ancient spirits. Great Zimbabwe's legacy. Over 700 years since its peak thriving era, Great Zimbabwe's towering walls and mystifying stone cones continue standing watch over the spectacular landscape. The culture and people that built this planned city at the frontier of African civilization, largely disappeared along with understanding of their daily lives and beliefs during the city's twilight abandonment. Great Zimbabwe's physical majesty coupled with disintegration of direct cultural connection opened imaginative space through the ages for Europeans, tribes, traders, and adventurers to fill with their own myths about the settlement's origins and supposed treasure troves. But the truth behind the myths ultimately proves more amazing than any legend. Great Zimbabwe challenges outdated colonial prejudices as one of the largest ancient settlements in sub-Saharan Africa, constructed, organized, inhabited, and run by sophisticated African people whose population exceeded 10 times the size of typical European cities when London had only 50,000 people in the late 1300s. This politically complex kingdom administered trade and economics, public welfare, defense, infrastructure, agriculture, religious institutions, and all aspects of civil society refined through centuries of continuous cultural development. Today, as the modern nation, Zimbabwe struggles with instability and controversy over equitable rights for native ethnic groups. Great Zimbabwe persists as an icon of past glorious achievement, power, artistic beauty, and national identity for indigenous people of the region. The site reminds all who gaze upon its splendid walls and wander through the expansive ancient city that African ingenuity, strength, and spirit endure unbroken throughout the ages.